So I'm Allison Hicks. I'm here with Tom Horne on November 9th, 2008 at the Valley of the Sun JCC for the Arizona Jewish Historical Society project. So thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.
It's a real pleasure to be with you.
So tell me about when your family first came to Arizona and why you came here and where you were living before.
I grew up in New York, and I was actually born in Montreal, and my parents came there from Poland. They were refugees. They ran away from Poland in 1939. My dad had predicted the invasion of Poland by the Germans. But my dad was a student of history, although he wasn't formally educated. He was individually very studious. Mm-hmm. And as a result of his study of history, he saw what was happening in Germany in the late 1930s, and he predicted that they would invade based on everything that he was observing, and tried to persuade everybody he knew to leave, and he couldn't persuade anyone. Forced my mother to leave. She didn't want to leave, but men had more authority in those days, and he forced her to leave. And my sister was born in Poland, and brought me up with the idea that the study of history was very important, and indeed it resulted in his survival when all of the people on both sides of his family died in the Holocaust. Then they came to New York. I grew up in New York, and then I came to Arizona in 1971. And
what prompted you to come to Arizona?
Well, it's kind of a long story. There was a census. I was practicing law in New York, actually. There was a census that had been done in 1970, and an issue of Fortune magazine on the future, the author of whom was Alvin Toffler, who later wrote Future Shock. And he predicted that Arizona had the brightest future of any place in the country. And I wanted to live in a state that was small and growing fast. I was already interested in politics and public policy, and had a good offer from a law firm here, so I came here.
Okay. And what was your first experience like here in comparison to coming from such a different, New York's different from a size perspective, but obviously the Jewish community was probably much different there than here.
I'm not sure the community was that different. It's large enough in Arizona so that I think it's a vibrant Jewish community, and I wouldn't think of it as being very different.
And the other thing is, I know today we're sitting at the I still call it the new JCC up in North Scottsdale. When you first came here, I know this facility wasn't here. The JCC that was around when you first arrived.
Bethany Home Road on the west side, I guess.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then I think before that even there was one over on Camelback.
My time it was the Bethany Home.
The Bethany Home.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to that facility? Did your family use it? Did you use it? Do you remember anything?
I was there from time to time for special events, but I didn't use it on a regular basis. Okay. I lived on the east side.
Okay. And did you guys join a temple when you first arrived here, or?
Yes, I joined Temple Solel when I first arrived in 1971. I've been a member of Temple Solel for 37 years, and I was president of Temple Solel for 2 years.
And how have you seen the temple change over the time that you've been here?
Well, Temple Solel has changed a lot because it started as a small temple with a determination to keep it small. In fact, we shared a church with a Methodist church, and we were very creative. And it evolved into a more traditional type of temple, I think, and much larger.
So where was it originally when it shared a space with the Methodist church?
On Lincoln Avenue, about 36th Street.
Okay, and it's now?
And now it has its own building near Scottsdale Road.
Okay, all right. And who was the rabbi there when you first arrived?
Fred Gross, very charismatic rabbi.
And how long was he?
He was there until 1976.
Okay.
78, until 1978, and then it was during my presidency that he decided to do something else, and I convened all the former presidents. They were all delighted to come back, because former presidents sometimes don't stay active, to choose a new rabbi, and we chose Maynard Bell as our new rabbi in 1978, and he stayed from 1978 till just a few years ago.
And how did the board end up selecting him?
We interviewed a lot of people. He was intellectually very strong.
Okay.
And I think that seemed to be what we were looking for.
So now tell me how you ended up with such a interesting focus on education from your law career.
Well, I had, as you have heard, I had 4 children that were 6 years apart, and when they were all in preschool, I ran for my local school board because I wanted to have them have good education, and I stayed long enough to hand the diploma to the last one, so I served 24 years on the school board, 10 years as its president. Then I ran for the legislature and served 4 years in the legislature. And there I was chairman of the Academic Accountability Committee, and I was vice chair of the Education Committee. So I had 24 years of school board experience and then 4 years in the legislature with a heavy concentration on education. So running for state superintendent of schools was a very natural next step.
And what was your motivation in terms of once you were done with the school board and your kids were out of the school system here, what made you want to run for legislature, and what kind of things were you passionate about?
Well, when I ran for the legislature, my kids were still in school, and I was very passionate about the quality of the education, and I was passionate about the funding for education because Arizona doesn't do a good job of funding its education. I consider that to be the ultimate family value. What's most important to us is the education of our children, and that's a very strong Jewish value, as you know, as well. And so I ran for the legislature in order to, primarily my biggest motivation at the legislature was to increase funding for education in Arizona.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier is that education in general is such a key family value for many Jewish families, and I think that's probably been true throughout history.
Yes.
How do you think that being a member of the Jewish community, being raised in a family where education was so valued, has dictated the way that you have gotten involved or driven the way that you've gotten involved? How much of that would you account for having been raised in a community that was so focused on education?
Yeah, I think it's a very fundamental Jewish value. Scholarship is central to the Jewish culture. Mm-hmm. And so valuing education is one of the reasons I think we've been successful wherever we are in the world, and whatever century it's been, we've been successful because we value education. Mm-hmm. And so I've wanted to bring that to the state as a whole.
What do you think has been your experience, again, going back to being a member of the Jewish community, what do you think your experience has been being a Jew in the legislature, on the school board, as the superintendent? Do you think that being Jewish has been a hindrance to you, a help to you? Have you found that people have any kind of anti-Semitism in public office in that area?
I haven't encountered anything substantial, either on the positive side or the negative side. There was a swastika on one of my signs, but it was just one sign out of many, and I've never encountered any overt anti-Semitism that I thought was significant. I would hear occasional isolated stories, somebody going door to door and saying my opponent was a Christian like you and I, and that sort of thing, but nothing significant. So I don't really feel it's had a significant impact on my career, although it did make the news one time because when I took a Jewish holiday off, one of the other legislators said she was surprised that Tom Horne took the Jewish holiday off because he looks and acts like a Mormon. She herself is a Mormon. So she really meant it to be complimentary. She didn't mean to be criticizing me. But that made the B1 of the newspaper. Tom Horne looks and acts like a Mormon.